Hey everyone, today I am super excited to share my latest free community project, the Grid City Generator. This actually created it with a collaboration with the university as a learning project because they wanted to learn more about procedural generation in Unreal Engine. So I've actually been working with them for the past 5-6 weeks or so on this project, and today I'm finally ready to share it with you guys. It is a free project and you can download it right now by following the link in the description. So this video is going to be a very quick showcase of the project and then a short tutorial on how to change some of the assets and configure the blueprints. And then if you want to do a much deeper dive, you can open the blueprints yourself and look at the comments. So first thing I'll do is when you open the project, you're going to be right here on this level demo. So go ahead and click BP City Generator here, and you can click right here to the button Generate City. So give it a second. It's going to go ahead and generate a city for us. It's going to be 4x8, and right here you see that we're not really seeing anything because we're in game mode. So if you press G and to get out of game mode, you can see that we have a bunch of buildings here, including a little park. So I'm going to go ahead and click play just to walk around a little bit and give you guys an idea of what this looks like. So this is the city. Just for scale, you can see that we are right here, spawning right here in a little beach. We're using Epic Games water asset. And I'm just going to start running by pressing left shift. And you can see that we have a lot of buildings spawned here. And as I fly around the city, you can use left shift while you're flying to propel yourself. You can see that we have a bunch of different buildings. Notice that we have similar buildings like these two that are going to be different heights and different materials. So we're actually generating each individual building here procedurally, and you're going to see exactly how that works. And then we have different crowns that you can see here, like these little antennas or this little like helipads. And then we have, if you look down, different roads, configuration, because the way that this city is generated is on a grid formation by spawning different city blocks. You can see on the left hand side I have some controls. Again, this is for demo purposes. So as I said, left shift sprints or launches you in the air. If you click the left mouse button, you can see that we can shoot little balls. This is just mostly for fun. If you press 1 or 2, you can change the time of day dynamically here. So you can see different ways of how the actual city looks. And here, when we're a little bit later, you can see this looks a little bit better in this time of day. And then you can zoom in and out with the camera. And if you press tab, it'll just reset the camera location. All right. So that is pretty much it. You are going to be able to generate a city based on a size of rows and columns. And I'm walking here just so you can get an idea of the scale of each building. So I'm going to go ahead and move out and go all the way back out here. And I'm going to remove the city by clicking the button here. And now we're going to go all the way down. And the first thing I wanted to show you guys was how we do the actual buildings. So if you go to the root folder here, _SC, blueprints, you can see here that we have BP Procedural Building. And if I drag this guy right here, you can see that we have a building. If you go here with the building selected all the way down and click Generate Building, you're going to notice that every time you do that, we're going to generate a different type of building. So we have different building models, and each time the building will get random materials, a random height, and a random crown. So right here under Setup, we have a building list, and you see that we have 5 different buildings that are included. And we have different generation modes. So generation type by default is random. So this basically picks a random building from this list and generates it. But you can always change this to specific, and specific will use the building index that corresponds to this array. So building index 0 will have this building, which we call the twister. So now when we click generate, you can see that we're generating building that is still the same model. That's the twister. Notice that the materials are changing and the height is changing, but obviously the models are not changing. So how does this work? If you expand the struct here, this is going to be index 0, right? We're going to divide the buildings into different sections. We're going to have a base mesh, which is going to be the bottom here. We're going to have a middle mesh, which are going to be the meshes that are going to kind of be stacked like Lego blocks to form the height of the building. Then you're going to have a roof mesh, which is going to be this little piece here. And finally, you're going to have a crown mesh, which you're going to put, in this case, you have this guy right here. So each one of those categories is its own array. So notice that if I expand here, the base mesh, you actually have a plus sign. So you can actually have more than one base mesh. In this case, we only have one. So you can see only one index, but you can easily click the plus sign here and add as many random meshes per category as you want. So if you are adding your own building, right, you can click here on the plus sign to add your own building, and you can add as many base mesh buildings as you want. Each individual mesh also has a list of materials by index. So let's say, for example, you're looking at the middle mesh here, which is going to be this twister page mesh. And I'm going to click here on the icon to browse to the assets. If I open this, you're going to see that we have this mesh right here, which is kind of twisting like this. And we have on the material slots two materials. We have index 0 and index 1. And a really easy way to know which materials correspond to what is by using the isolate toggle here. So if I go to element 0, isolate, you can see that the element 0, index 0, is looking at kind of the edges or the frame of the building. And if I do the same thing for element 1, you'll notice that we have the middle, which in this case is going to be more like the glass of the building. So with that in mind, when you import your own mesh, you can have obviously as many material slots. Keep in mind which elements or which indexes reference to what. And in this case, you can see that for index 0, which is kind of the frame, we have 3 different material colors. And then for index 1, which is going to be the glass, in this case, we only have 2 different kinds of glass tone. So that's the way you can organize it. Each individual index or material slot per mesh can have its own random list of materials. So you can really go crazy with the amount of combinations that you can add here. And finally, we have the crown mesh list, which in this case, we have 8 different meshes that are included. And this is the exact same thing. You have a static mesh and you have a list of materials. And then once you add all these things, you actually have here a different kind of generation. So, sorry, let me go right here. You have rotation settings and you have floor settings for the individual building itself. So rotation settings are going to allow you to rotate each individual mesh as you're stacking it with 2 different modes. You can either use an offset or you can use an actual random rotation from a list. So in this case, this building was designed to have an offset of 45 degrees every single time you stack one of the meshes. So just to demonstrate that, if I change this to like 20, you can clearly see that the meshes are not aligning properly because they were modeled to be offset by 45 degrees. So you're not limited to designing buildings that are super blocky. You can have really interesting designs that twist and turn like this. Or you can use random rotation, and then you can add a random rotation here. And this is again an array where you can add as many rotations as you want. So you can have like 20 or I don't know, 55. And if you change this to use random rotation, each individual one will pick either a rotation of 20 or 55 from the previous mesh that was added. So this is kind of a progressive rotation. Then you have floor settings, and these floor settings again have 2 different modes. The floor generation method is either random number from range or specific number. Random number from range will pick a random floor number between the x and the y, or the min and the max. And in this case, for this building, is between 6 and 12 floors. So this is why every time we click on generate building, you can see that the height keeps changing. Or you can use specific, sorry, not here, here, specific number, and in this case it's 5 floors, and you can change the height right here, and it'll always be that specific height. So if I want this building to always be 12 floors, notice that now when we're generating the building, the only thing that is changing in this case is now just the material and the crown, because every single time we generate it, we're sticking to that height. You can also have some other really interesting building types, like this one, for example, which you can actually add random rotation. See, this is like a pteropod, some more futuristic type of building. And if I click here, this is the index 3. You'll notice that in this case we have a rotation of, again, 45 degrees. But if you design a building like this, you can change this to whatever you want. So even 20 degrees, notice that it still makes sense because each individual one is just rotating by 20 degrees each. So you have a lot of flexibility here on how you design your buildings. And finally, you have right here, you have a % chance to spawn and a crown offset. A % chance to spawn is between 0 and 1. 0 is obviously 0% and 1 is 100%. So you can control how often these buildings appear in your city by changing this % chance to spawn. So some buildings will have a bigger or a higher % chance to spawn, like this one is 100, but this first one that we saw is only 25%. And notice that we have a crown offset. So basically the crown is placed right there at the edge of the collision of the mesh. So in this case, we don't need an offset, it's going to be placed correctly. But if we have a building like the first one we saw, which is building in index 0, if you really look at the top mesh, you're going to see that we have an indentation there. See that how even though the edge of the mesh is right here, we actually have an indentation here at the bottom, which is why we have a negative crown offset. If we don't do that, the crown will simply be placed here at the top because it's looking at the bounds of the asset. So you have this option to make it positive or negative. And in this case, this is why you see the negative crown offset. All right, so that's pretty much it. I'm not going to dive into the actual blueprint code, but obviously you can open it and take a look at the blueprint itself. It's actually fairly simple. We have one simple function that generates the building, and everything is fully commented. The next step in generating the city is going to be the actual city blocks. So if you go back to the blueprints folder and open city blocks, we're going to go ahead and grab one of these assets and just dump it in the level. And you can see what happens here. This is a simple blueprint that has a sidewalk mesh. You can see we have the corners here and different buildings that are in a specific configuration. And even just moving this blueprint, you can see that the buildings continue to regenerate. So every single one of these buildings in this location will be randomly generated with a random height, random material, and random building from the list. And if we open this blueprint, this is actually the simplest one. You can see here on the left hand side that all we have is a sidewalk mesh, which is going to be this one here, a single mesh. And then you have a bunch of child actors that represents the buildings. And each child actor has the class BP Procedural Building. So if you ever wanted to add your own city blocks, all you need to do is come here to sidewalk, change the static mesh to whatever mesh you want, and then go ahead and move these buildings to whatever configuration you want. You obviously can add more or remove buildings, and all you would need to do is add a child actor component here, or simply duplicate the one that's here. I would actually recommend duplicating because it already has the correct class here. And the same thing, if you wanted to create your own city block from scratch, I would just recommend that you duplicate it from here. That way you don't have to worry about the code. Again, super simple, but this code allows you to respawn the buildings by clicking respawn buildings. So this is going to be handy when you spawn your entire city and you want to change the buildings in a specific block. You can always click respawn buildings and you can see how the buildings are respawned. That gives you a little bit more control over how each individual block generates. Okay, I'm gonna delete that. And finally, we have the actual city generator blueprint itself, which you can see right here. And I already have one of these in the level. That's what we used at the beginning to generate the city. And again, this is going to be fairly simple. You're going to have a block list, which is already populated with all our city blocks here. I'm going to expand it here. And each item is going to have the city block class. You can see city block 1, 2, 3, a length and a width. And this is going to be the length and the width of the static mesh for the sidewalk. And you're going to have a % chance to spawn, again 0 to 1, and in this case we have a max number of spawns. So you can actually limit the max amount of times that a specific city block can spawn in your city, or -1 means it's an unlimited number of times. So you can have, in this case, this city block spawn as many times as you want. There's a limitation though here with the size of the city blocks. Each city block must be the exact same size. And that is just the way that I wrote the code because I wanted to keep it simple. This is a learning project, right? So we wanted to keep the way that we generate the city fairly simple. So you can, if you create a new block, make sure that it's the same size as the ones that we're using here. Or if you want to use your own blocks, you can make them any size you want. Just make sure that all of the city blocks are the exact same size. And you'll see here that almost all of the blocks have different % chance to spawn, but at the very end here, entry number 30, we have our park, which is a special city block. And for this one, notice that we have max number of spawns is 1. So we wanted to have a special city block, and if I open it here, you'll see it's like a little park block. We have some trees here. We have some statues here, and we even have, in this case, was supposed to be a lake, right? We have a little reflective surface. So we wanted to break the pattern of the city. So in this case, we want this park to just appear once. So if I come here and I click on generate city, you'll notice that as many times as we generate the city, that park will only appear once. So I'm going to give it a second here to generate the city. Another thing you'll notice, and it's going to auto-save the packages here, unfortunately, but I'll keep talking. So two things that are important to notice with this, we are saying max number of spawns. That doesn't guarantee that a city block will spawn. It just says if that city block is selected from the list randomly, it cannot spawn more than X number of times, right? So there is a chance that if you have a lot of city blocks, that one of those blocks will not be selected. So you, in this case, you may have a city that doesn't have a park, right? Just because it was the city block was not randomly selected. But if it is selected, then you're going to respect that max number of spawns. And the second thing here is the number of rows and number of columns. So in this case, I'll make this a little bit bigger. You can see that we did have a park spawn, but only once. So I can kind of come down here and you can see that we have a park here. If I keep spawning the city, this is only going to appear once. You can change the number of rows and columns. So in this case, it's going to be like a 4x4, for example. And that will obviously change the size of the city because we're going to generate all of the columns and then all of the rows. And in this case, a 4x4 looks kind of long, and that's because each city block is, the length of each city block is longer than its width. So even a 4x4 in this case looks like that. So say that this is your city, you can always come and select the city block itself. And remember what I said earlier, you can come back and change the buildings themselves per city block by clicking respawn building. So I'm going to come back here and do a 4x8 again. That's in this case the max number for this demo level. And I want you to try to notice something. And I'm going to kind of come all the way back here. You'll notice that when the city is generated, the height of the building seems to be changing based on the location of the buildings. So when I generate the city, notice that the buildings towards the center are higher than the ones that are towards the edges. And that is because when we're generating the city, each individual building is getting the distance between itself and the center of the city. And then based on that information is adding a multiplier, calculating a multiplier to the random floor value that it's calculating. So that works actually by using a curve asset here, which if I open here, you'll see we have a nice little curve between 0 and 1. And what's happening here is that each individual building is calculating a normalized distance between 0 and 1 based on the city center. So buildings that are closer to the center are going to be closer to a distance of quote unquote 0 because the distance to the center is close to 0. And the buildings towards the edges are going to be closer to 1 because they're obviously much farther from the center. So if you look at it that way and you look at this curve, what you're going to see is that the value of 0 has, value of 0 in the curve has a number of 2, and the value on 1 has a value of 0.5. These values here are used as multipliers. So let's say that a building is near the center of the city and has 5 floors. Then you're going to take that 5 and multiply it by 2, making the actual height of the building 10 floors. But if that same building with 5 floors is spawned towards the edge, you're going to multiply that by 0.5, meaning you're going to half the number of floors and use a ceiling. So in that case, it will be 3 floors instead of 2.5, obviously. So what that means is that you can easily change this effect by modifying this curve here. So if I have the curve, and I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller here, and I want to make this way more dramatic, I say, hey, I want the buildings towards the middle or 0 to have a multiplier of 4 times as opposed to 2 times. And I come back here to the city generator and I click on generate city. Give it a second. You're going to see a much bigger difference here in height for each individual building. And that's because we're using this curve asset to do that multiplier. So that's a really neat thing that real cities usually have. You can see here now that is way different. Notice that it's not perfect. It is a multiplier based on the random value of floors, which again makes it more realistic. So you see this building here should be smaller, but because of the randomness of the thing, this just went on the high end of the edge of the min and max, and then got a multiplier. So it still gives it a nice little random feel, but overall you should see that silhouette mimic what you see here on this graph. All right, the last thing I will show you guys is how to migrate the project. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the city. Most of you already know this, but I always get questions like this. So the way you migrate this properly to your own project is you need to open this in Unreal Engine 4.26. And then you need to come here to the root folder. In this case is _SC. And you can click on the root folder itself, click on migrate. And then you're going to see, well, okay, we got to save the level first. So go ahead and save the demo level. And then we're going to come back here and click again, migrate. It's going to give you a list of all of the assets. Click OK. And this is very important. On the Windows Explorer, navigate to your project and select the content folder. It has to be the content folder so things migrate correctly. Click select folder and you'll see here it's going to copy all of the files to your custom project. And then you can open your custom project and you should see the same thing. Go to maps and click on level demo and it'll open this level demo, and you can immediately click on generate city and it'll do its thing. One quick thing to note is the sample blueprint. I'm using the third person character here. is going to be right here outside. Again, this is for demo purposes, not really part of the asset, but if you really wanted to have that, this is the blueprint that has the code for, like shooting and turning off camera collisions and switching the times of day. If you wanted to have exactly what I have, then you obviously want to migrate this, in which case click on the content folder right here, and here click migrate. And it'll migrate everything, including the sample third-person blueprint, to your own project. Then of course you can delete it. So yeah, that is pretty much it, guys. Hopefully I covered everything. Open the blueprints yourself and take a look at the comments. It should be pretty self-explanatory how I'm doing everything. Again, this is a free project released under the MIT license, meaning that you can use it for whatever you want, including commercial purposes, right? You can use this for your own game or your own projects. The only restriction is that you need to keep the attributions, meaning that you need to say in your licensing that, I did this and the professor from the university created all of those assets. I'm gonna leave a link for you to download this on the description of this video. I also have a bunch of other free assets on my GitHub if you were not aware, and you can go there and you can download all of the different assets. I have a bunch of different assets that I release. I love doing this whenever I get the time to release free projects for the community. So if you ever wanted to support me in some way, if you have some money and you want to support me, honestly, the best way that you can do that is simply by buying some of my assets in the Unreal Engine marketplace. So I get this question a lot also. Hey, do you have a Patreon? Do you have another way that I can send you something? I don't have any of that. So again, all of the free assets are there. Click on the link, and if you wanted to support me, just buy one of my assets on the marketplace, and I would really appreciate that. Leave any of the questions that you have in the comments below. Questions. If you haven't joined our Discord, I am way more active there because I don't have a lot of time to record this video. So if you have any questions, join our Discord, and you're going to see there's a pretty big community there with a lot of people, and I'm a lot more active there. So thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed the project. I hope you learned from it. I hope it's useful. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.